Local for you. From the heart of the Quad Cities, your local election headquarters presents For the Record. And now, here's your host, Jim Needleman.
Hello everyone, I'm Jim Needleman and this is For the Record. High-stakes politics are at work once again on Capitol Hill. Democrats and Republicans are trying to carve out the high ground in the battle over President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee. President Trump got prime-time coverage when he introduced Brett Kavanaugh as his choice to serve on the bench. It's the second appointment to the Supreme Court during his first year and a half in office. Kavanaugh is a graduate of Yale Law School. He currently serves on the D.C. Circuit Court. He clerked for Justice Anthony Kennedy, the man he would replace on the court. His decisions and writings are already under scrutiny. He worked for independent counsel Kenneth Starr during his investigation of President Bill Clinton. In fact, Kavanaugh was the lead author of the Starr report. Judge Kavanaugh has written since then that the president should not be burdened with civil suits or criminal investigations. He also wrote that the president should have the full power to hire and fire any independent counsel. Kavanaugh recently got attention for his dissenting opinion that opposed a ruling that let an undocumented minor get an abortion, a move that sided with the Trump administration. Well, Democrats see that as a sign he would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. They don't like the other things I mentioned either, saying that it's an indication he would be a political justice. Republicans praise him as someone who sticks to the letter of the Constitution. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin sits on the Judiciary Committee that will oversee Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings. I had a chance to speak with him about a few things earlier this week, including the Kavanaugh nomination. Here's the first part of that conversation. Let's start with the Supreme Court and this week's nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy. He's got the education and experience. Democrats, though, were quick to pounce in opposition. Just on this basis alone, how can you argue that he's not qualified based on that background?
Well, I'm not arguing that he's not qualified. We certainly have a lot of questions to ask. We're going to ask for the documentation that we ask for from all nominees to show his service both in the White House as well as in the courts of the District of Columbia. But it isn't just a question of qualifications and education. It's a question of his position on issues and whether it's consistent with what the American people hope for in the highest court in the land.
How much are Democrats still fighting the results of the last election?
Well, I don't know that it's a matter of fighting the results. We understand them. Currently, there are 51 Republican senators, 49 Democrats. John McCain's been sick for a long time and can't come to Washington. So it's 50-49. A majority makes this decision. So it really depends on whether or not any Republican senators have problems with this nominee and would vote with Democrats in opposition.
To what extent is what happened to Merrick Garland still looming over this confirmation?
Oh, it will loom over it for a long period of time. You see, what Senator McConnell did with the Scalia vacancy had never been done, never, in the history of the United States Senate. What Senator McConnell said is we're going to leave the vacancy on the Supreme Court for a year in the hopes that we can elect a Republican president to fill it. That's never been done before. And so, of course, we have a long memory, and it's unfortunate that that occurred.
I want to get to something that you're directly tied to with this nominee, because you maintain that he essentially lied during his last confirmation hearing when he was up for the Court of Appeals. At the time, he denied having any involvement in the interrogation policies carried out during President George W. Bush's administration when you questioned him at the time. Critics, of course, call that policy torture. Now, a Washington Post article then later indicated he was involved in the discussion, and you personally referred it to the Justice Department for investigation, but no perjury charges were ever filed. I imagine you think this is something that might disqualify him, though how is that possible if federal prosecutors didn't find it worth pursuing?
Well, I can just tell you this. I wasn't asking for perjury charges. What I was asking for Judge Kavanaugh is to explain it. He, under sworn testimony, said he had nothing to do with detention, interrogation, and then it later came out through Vice President Cheney that he was in a meeting and did participate in a conversation on those subjects. I wrote him a letter as a judge asking for an explanation. I wrote that letter a long time ago. He never responded to it.
Senator, you mentioned John McCain earlier, and his potential absence from a confirmation vote leaves Republicans with no votes to spare if the Democrats are united in opposition to Kavanaugh. Your party is appealing to Republicans Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, specifically on the Roe v. Wade issue. However, both voted to confirm Neil Gorsuch last year, as well as 3 Democrats. Now, aren't the Democrats setting themselves up for failure with this strategy again?
Way too early in the process to make that kind of prediction. Of course, we're going to all sit down with Judge Kavanaugh, have an opportunity to ask questions directly. We're going to look at his record, the documents that evidence his service in government and his work on the court. And then, of course, there'll be public hearings where under oath he'll answer questions. So we're a long way from enough information to make a final judgment on his nomination.
Part one of my conversation with Senator Dick Durbin. That brings us to our question of the week. What do you think about Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court? Send your answer by email to fortherecord or WHBF.com, or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.